So the bantamweight division of the UFC is in a really interesting position right now. Not just because you've got a lot of fighters who can be looked at as number one contenders like Suga Sean O'Malley, Umar Nurmagomedov, and Song Yadong, and also you have to consider that Umar and Song are also about to be squared off, and they'll be an apparent number one contender after that match. But it's primarily because we're still sitting and waiting for this third fight between Merab Dvalishvili and Peter Yan to be booked. From what I recently remember, I believe it was the reason why the fight hasn't been booked yet is because there's an injury with Peter Yan. I believe Peter Yan is still in recovery from a hand injury, I think. I do remember it being on Peter Yan's side. The reason why the final fight in this trilogy between Peter Yan and Merab Dvalishvili hasn't been fully booked yet, and that's an issue. It's an issue because you have fighters who are coming off of big fights and are now being looked at as true number one contenders. Sean O'Malley, especially, who has just come off of a big win at UFC Freedom 250. He won it in true Suga Sean O'Malley fashion with a sniper accuracy, and he's calling for the belt. This same situation is also happening at middleweight with Dricus du Plessis, who just came off of a big win against Kamaru Usman and is calling for the belt. But in that same division, you have another awkward situation between Sean Strickland and Khamzat Chimaev, where you could look at what happened in their first fight and kind of see great potential for a rematch. Especially when you have a fighter that has as much pull as Khamzat Chimaev with a huge fan base, a big name who's got big wins, who's had the belt before. And granted, Khamzat doesn't have a pile of title defenses behind him, but again, he's one of the most noteworthy names in the UFC to date, and it's primarily, I think, due to TikTok and all the edits he's got, about being a wolf and I kill everybody and stuff. But you have to look at that and consider how much pull that can create, in terms of the UFC and how much of an influence you can have on what fight you fight next. So it's very likely that we see a rematch between Sean Strickland and Khamzat Chimaev. But looking back at bantamweight, again, things are just are weird. On one end, you can say that this third fight, this trilogy fight, is very likely, and I believe that the UFC is going to go with signing the trilogy fight before ever considering Sean O'Malley fighting Peter Yan. But, again, considering Sean O'Malley has come off of this big win, he's a big name, he's got a relatively large fan base, he's always on social media, he's building more and more influence. You cannot really disregard the potential for Sean O'Malley stepping over Merab Dvalishvili and fighting Peter Yan, You could also consider Peter Yan probably stalling and not wanting to fight Merab and wanting to get that rematch against Suga Sean O'Malley instead and get that get back for losing against Sean in the first fight. So it's weird. It's a really weird situation. Merab Dvalishvili is kind of just in the balance here. I think Merab wants this third trilogy fight more than anybody else. I think it's because he feels like he's very close to the title. And also, I feel like Merab fought that second fight against Peter Yan in a weird way. He didn't fight it his normal way. I didn't see classic Merab Dvalishvili in there in that rematch with Peter Yan. I feel like Merab was really riding high. He was racking up a lot of title defenses. He had just shut down Suga Sean O'Malley 2 times in a row, and he felt like he needed to mix things up. And that's what I hate about certain champions. They get bored and they feel like a certain time is the time to try new things, and it never works out. Sometimes it will with the smarter ones, but other times what works best is the best way to work. If it ain't broke, you don't fix it. Merab Dvalishvili, he's known for his grappling pressure. He's known for his relentless takedowns. He's not known as a world-class striker who's got pinpoint accuracy. He's not known as that, And he tried to fight like that against Peter Yan, and he allowed Peter Yan, in my opinion, no disrespect to Peter Yan, but I believe Merab Dvalishvili allowed Peter Yan to get comfortable, to get into a groove. When Peter Yan is comfortable and focused and allowed to get into a real flow state and groove, he's unstoppable. Petr Yan's striking and technique is beautiful. Not just with kicks, with punches, with timing, with accuracy. He's one of the best strikers, to ever grace the octagon, in my opinion. And when he's, not worried about constant takedown pressure, he can really just, get into his zone. And he did that against Merab in that rematch. And he just punished Merab round after round. And some people say it was close and that Merab had moments. But I feel like Petr Yan had control of that full fight from the first bell to the last. It was just the Petr Yan show in that rematch. The first fight was the Merab show. Second fight, Petr Yan show. And that's why I feel like a third fight is incredibly warranted and should be gone with over some potential rematch between Suga Sean O'Malley and Petr Yan. Because, again, we had the first fight, dominant win for Merab. Second fight, dominant win for Petr Yan, in my opinion. The third fight should be the deciding factor. The fight that lets all the fans, the MMA world, know who's the better fighter between Petr Yan and Merab Dvalishvili. And I think in that third fight, we're going to see classic Merab again. We're going to see a Merab Dvalishvili who's relentless with takedowns, gunning for them time after time after time again, and he'll drown Petr Yan that way. I think Merab can drown just about anybody if he's fighting his normal way. Merab has superhuman cardio. It's something I've been raving about him before he even won the belt, because I looked at how he's been winning. I looked at his fight with Henry Cejudo. I watched that fight live, and I was like, what the heck is he on? What type of gas tank does this guy have? He looks like an animal in there, just gunning, takedown after takedown after takedown. And you drown guys like that, especially when you've got this superhuman cardio that allows you to have this output with grappling, with takedowns. And I think if Merab brings that level, brings that game plan to this third fight in this trilogy, Petr Yan's screwed whichever way you look at it, Because, again, Petr Yan has all the skill in the world, but it won't matter if you're gassed, if you have no energy to show that skill off. And in that third fight, rewatch it. I encourage you to rewatch that first fight between Merab and Petr Yan. In those later rounds, Petr Yan had nothing. He had nothing because he was constantly worried about the takedown, so he had no comfortability, to get into a groove with the striking. And B, he really had no energy to properly defend the takedowns because he was gassed. And if we could see that version of Merab in this third fight, Merab's getting his belt back. And that means, doomsday for fighters like Suga Sean O'Malley and Umar Nurmagomedov, who have already been shut down by Merab. The only fresh-faced Merab can look at and fight is Song Yadong. Because to my recollection, I don't believe Merab and Song Yadong have ever fought before. But it doesn't look like Song's going to beat Umar in this upcoming fight. So, we're looking at Umar and Suga Sean O'Malley becoming, co-number one contenders. And if Merab gets that belt back, we're going to have to face Suga Sean and Umar off, and see who can really become an ultra number one contender. And then no matter what, we'll have to face that guy off with Merab. And then Merab will, at some point, maybe lap his division, and do what fighters like Aljamain Sterling have nearly done and GSP have done. So, the ball is really in the UFC's court. It's not in Merab's court. I don't think it's in Petr Yan's court. You could say Petr Yan might be the A side in this whole situation, and that, like I said, he's stalling and he wants to fight Suga Sean instead. But I think the UFC is really just weighing their options. They wanted to see what Suga Sean could do at Freedom 250. They're probably going to want to see what Umar can do against Song Yadong. And then maybe immediately after the Umar-Song Yadong fight, they'll figure out a way to get this Petr Yan, Merab 3-fight booked. Or they replace Merab with an Umar or a Suga Sean to fight Petr Yan instead. And then Merab goes on a whole rampage on social media, because I would definitely assume Merab would be PO'd if the UFC decided to look over him. But I don't think they should. Merab is a heck of a fighter. And yes, his fighting style can be boring at times with all the takedowns, but he's dominant. He's dominant that way. He's got something we really haven't seen in the UFC ever. That strong of a gas tank, where he can just go round after round after round. It's unique. it's unique. And, if it's utilized the right way, we could see Merab becoming a true all-timer, a top 10, maybe top 5 all-time fighter. If he can win his belt back and continue racking up title defenses and lapping his division and dominating it, maybe considering a move up to a different division and going for double champ status, we could see Merab in the top few. He's not there just yet. I was projecting him to be there before he lost to Peter Yan. But like I said, I expect him to be back there. I think he's going to fight the third fight against Peter Yan the same way he's been fighting fights for a long time now, and he will drown Peter Yan and whoever else is in front of him for the near future if he decides to continue fighting the way he's been fighting, which is not entertaining the striking too much and going back to the relentless takedowns, utilizing that superhuman cardio. But it's up to the machine. It's up to what, path Merab wants to trek downward. Because if you're gonna let the striking legend Peter Yan get comfortable and get into a groove, he's gonna be unstoppable. No matter how much cardio you want to use, if you're not gonna use it in the right way and go for takedowns, Peter Yan's gonna chop you up. Let me know what you think.